Are aliens humans from the future? In the year 2147, humanity had reached the pinnacle of technological advancement. Time travel, once a mere theoretical concept, had become a reality. The Temporal Exploration Agency, TEA, was established to oversee and regulate time travel, ensuring that the past remained untouched to preserve the integrity of the timeline. However, as with any powerful technology, there were those who sought to exploit it for their own gain. Elara Voss, a brilliant physicist and one of the pioneers of time travel technology, had always been fascinated by the mysteries of the universe. She had dedicated her life to understanding the fabric of time and space, and her work had earned her a prestigious position at TEA. But Elara had a secret, a theory she had been developing in secret, one that could change everything. Elara believed that the so-called aliens that had been reported throughout human history were not extraterrestrial beings at all, but rather humans from the future. She theorized that future humans had been traveling back in time to observe and perhaps even influence the course of history. The implications of this theory were staggering, and if proven true, it could redefine humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. One night, while working late in her lab, Elara made a breakthrough. She had developed a device capable of detecting temporal anomalies, subtle disturbances in the fabric of time that could indicate the presence of time travelers. Excited by her discovery, she decided to test the device in a remote area known for numerous UFO sightings. As she arrived at the site, a desolate desert under a star-filled sky, Elara activated the device. Almost immediately, it began to pick up unusual readings. Her heart raced as she followed the signals, leading her to a hidden underground facility. The entrance was concealed by advanced technology, but Elara's device allowed her to bypass the security systems. Inside, she found a vast, futuristic laboratory filled with equipment far beyond anything she had ever seen. The walls were lined with holographic displays showing historical events, and in the center of the room stood a group of figures dressed in sleek, silver suits. They turned to face her, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Voss, one of them said, their voice calm and resonant. We've been expecting you. Elara's mind raced. Who are you? She demanded. What is this place? The figure stepped forward, removing their helmet to reveal a face that was unmistakably human, yet somehow different, more refined, as if evolution had continued to shape them over millennia. We are your descendants, they said. We are humans from the future. Elara's theory was correct. These beings were not aliens, but future humans who had mastered time travel. They explained that they had been observing the past to ensure the survival of their timeline. Their world was on the brink of collapse, ravaged by the consequences of humanity's actions in the 21st and 22nd centuries. They had come back in a desperate attempt to alter the course of history and prevent the catastrophe that awaited them. But there was a catch. The future humans revealed that their presence in the past was causing unintended ripples in the timeline, creating paradoxes that threatened to unravel the fabric of reality. They needed Elara's help to stabilize the timeline and find a way to save both their future and her present. Elara was faced with an impossible choice. She could help the future humans, risking further damage to the timeline, or she could turn them away, condemning their world to destruction. As she weighed her options, she realized that the only way forward was to work together, combining the knowledge of the past and the future to find a solution. In the months that followed, Elara and the future humans worked tirelessly to develop a plan. They created a device capable of repairing the temporal rifts caused by their presence, while also implementing changes in the present to steer humanity away from the path of destruction. It was a delicate balancing act, but they were determined to succeed. As the final piece of the device was put into place, Elara stood with the future humans, ready to activate it. This is it, she said, her voice steady, the moment that will determine the fate of both our worlds. With a deep breath, she pressed the button. The device hummed to life, sending out waves of energy that rippled through time and space. The temporal rifts began to close, and the timeline stabilized. The future humans smiled, their eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Voss, they said. You have given us a chance to rebuild our world. We will never forget what you have done. As they prepared to return to their own time, Elara felt a sense of hope. She had uncovered the truth about the so-called aliens, and in doing so, had helped to secure a future for humanity. The journey had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it had also revealed the incredible potential of human ingenuity and cooperation. As the future humans disappeared into the time stream, Elara looked up at the stars. knowing that the universe was far more interconnected than anyone had ever imagined, and somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of time and space, the future of humanity was being written, a future that she had helped to shape. The ripple effect. The moment the future humans vanished into the time stream, Elara felt a strange stillness settle over the desert. The air seemed heavier, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. She stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where they had disappeared, her mind racing with questions. Had they succeeded? Had the timeline been repaired? And what would happen now that the future humans had returned to their own time? As she made her way back to her lab, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The world around her looked the same, but there was an undercurrent of change, like a faint hum just beyond the range of hearing. She checked her temporal anomaly detector, but it remained silent. Whatever had happened, it was subtle, too subtle for her instruments to detect. When she arrived at the lab, she was greeted by her assistant, Jackson, a young and eager engineer who had been working with her for the past 2 years. He looked up from his workstation, his face lighting up with relief. "Drive, Voss, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours," he said, holding up his comm device, which was filled with missed calls. Elara frowned. "Hours? I was only gone for a few minutes." Jackson's brow furrowed. "No, you've been gone since yesterday." I was starting to worry. Elara's heart skipped a beat. Time displacement. The device she and the future humans had activated must have caused a ripple effect, altering the flow of time in ways she hadn't anticipated. She quickly checked the date on her device and confirmed that, from Jackson's perspective, she had indeed been gone for over 24 hours, but for her, it had only been a matter of minutes. "Something's happened," she said, her voice low. "Something big. I need to run some tests." Over the next few days, Elara and Jackson worked around the clock, analyzing data from the temporal anomaly detector and cross-referencing it with historical records. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The timeline had been altered, but not in the way they had expected. Small, seemingly insignificant events had shifted, events that, when taken together, could have profound implications for the future. For example, a scientist who had been on the verge of a groundbreaking discovery in renewable energy had suddenly changed careers, becoming a painter instead. A political leader who had been instrumental in brokering a peace treaty had never been born, and in a remote village in South America, a child who had once been destined to die in a tragic accident was now alive and thriving. Elara realized that the future humans' presence in the past had created a butterfly effect, causing ripples that extended far beyond their immediate actions. The timeline was still intact, but it had been subtly reshaped, like a river diverted by a single stone. As she delved deeper into the data, Elara noticed something else, a pattern. The changes seemed to be clustered around specific points in time, as if someone, or something, was deliberately altering the course of history. But who, and why? Her thoughts turned to the future humans. Had they returned to their own time, or had they stayed behind, working in secret to further manipulate the timeline? And if so, what was their ultimate goal? Determined to find answers, Elara decided to take a risk. Using the temporal anomaly detector, she pinpointed the location of another temporal rift, a faint disturbance in the fabric of time that suggested the presence of time travelers. She and Jackson packed their equipment and set out for the coordinates, which led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. As they approached the warehouse, Elara's detector began to buzz with activity. The rift was here, and it was strong. She signaled for Jackson to stay back as she cautiously entered the building, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, she found a scene that took her breath away. The warehouse was filled with advanced technology, holographic displays, temporal stabilizers, and a large, circular portal that shimmered with an otherworldly light. Standing in front of the portal was a figure dressed in a silver suit, their back turned to her. "Who are you?" Elara demanded, her voice echoing in the vast space. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face that was both familiar and alien. It was one of the future humans she had met in the desert, but there was something different about them, something colder, more calculating. "Drive, Voss," they said, their voice devoid of emotion. "You shouldn't have come here." Elara's mind raced. "What are you doing? You said you were going back to your own time. Why are you still here?" The future human's eyes narrowed. "Our mission is not yet complete. The timeline is still unstable, and there are complications. We must ensure that the future we desire comes to pass." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What are you planning?" The future humans stepped closer, their gaze piercing. "You wouldn't understand. Your perspective is limited by your place in time. But know this, we will do whatever it takes to secure our survival, even if it means rewriting history." Before Elara could respond, the future human activated the portal, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, they were gone, leaving Elara alone in the warehouse, her mind reeling with the implications of what she had just witnessed. As she made her way back to Jackson, she knew that the stakes had just gotten higher. The future humans were not just observers, they were active participants in shaping the timeline, and their actions could have catastrophic consequences. Elara realized that she had to stop them, but to do so, she would need to understand their true motives and find a way to counteract their influence. The battle for the timeline had just begun, and Elara was determined to fight for the future, not just for herself, but for all of humanity. Elara and Jackson returned to the lab, their minds buzzing with questions and unease. The encounter with the future human had left them both shaken. It was clear now that the future humans were not merely trying to fix the timeline, they were actively rewriting it to suit their own agenda. But what was that agenda, and how far were they willing to go to achieve it? Elara spent the next few days poring over the data they had collected from the warehouse. The temporal rift they had discovered was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not just a point of entry or exit for time travelers, it was a nexus, a hub of temporal activity. The future humans were using it to move back and forth through time, making subtle changes that rippled across history. "What are they trying to accomplish?" Jackson asked one evening, as they sat in the lab surrounded by holographic displays. "If they're from the future, why not just tell us what needs to be done to fix things? Why all the secrecy?" Elara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know, but I think it's more complicated than we realize. They said their world was on the brink of collapse. Maybe they're not just trying to prevent that collapse, maybe they're trying to create a new future, one where they have more control." Jackson frowned. "But that's dangerous. If they keep messing with the timeline, they could end up destroying it completely." Elara nodded. "Exactly. That's why we need to stop them. But to do that, we need to understand their end game. And to do that, we need to find out where they're going and what they're changing." Over the next few weeks, Elara and Jackson worked tirelessly to track the future humans' movements through time. Using the temporal anomaly detector, they identified several key moments in history where the timeline had been altered. Each change was small, a decision made differently, a life saved or lost, but together, they formed a pattern. The future humans were targeting pivotal moments in human history, moments that had shaped the course of civilization. They were not just trying to prevent a catastrophe, they were trying to steer humanity onto a specific path, one that led to their own existence. But as Elara delved deeper, she began to notice something troubling. The changes the future humans were making were not just about survival, they were about control. They were eliminating threats to their power, ensuring that their version of the future remained unchallenged. One night, as she was reviewing the data, Elara made a startling discovery. The future humans were not just altering the past, they were erasing entire timelines. Every time they made a change, they created a new branch in the timeline, leaving the old one to collapse. And with each collapse, countless lives were lost, entire realities wiped from existence. Elara felt a surge of anger and determination. She couldn't let this continue. She had to find a way to stop them, to protect the timeline and the lives that depended on it. But how? The future humans had technology far beyond anything she had access to. They could move through time with ease, while she was limited to observing from the sidelines. She needed a way to level the playing field. That's when she remembered the device she had built with the future humans, the one that had stabilized the temporal rifts. If she could modify it, perhaps she could use it to counteract their influence, to close the rifts they were creating and prevent them from making further changes. Elara and Jackson worked around the clock, modifying the device and testing it in controlled environments. It was risky. Tampering with the fabric of time was always dangerous, but they had no other choice. The future of humanity depended on it. Finally, after weeks of work, the device was ready. Elara and Jackson set out for the warehouse, where they had first encountered the future humans. The temporal nexus was still active, pulsing with energy as it connected to different points in time. As they approached the portal, Elara felt a sense of dread. She knew that once they activated the device, there would be no turning back. They would be entering a battle for the very fabric of reality. "Are you ready?" Jackson asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Elara nodded. Let's do this. They activated the device, and a wave of energy surged through the room. The portal flickered and dimmed, the temporal rifts beginning to close. But before they could finish, a group of future humans emerged from the portal, their faces grim. Stop, one of them commanded, raising a hand. You don't understand what you're doing. Elara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. I understand perfectly. You're destroying the timeline, erasing entire realities to suit your own needs. I won't let you do that. The future humans shook their head. You think you're saving humanity, but you're only delaying the inevitable. Our world is dying. Drive, Voss. If we don't change the past, there will be no future for any of us. Elara hesitated, her resolve wavering for a moment, but then she remembered the lives that had been lost, the timelines that had been erased. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions. There has to be another way, she said firmly, a way to save your future without destroying ours. The future humans exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as though they might relent, but then one of them stepped forward, their eyes cold and determined. We're sorry, Drive, Voss, but we can't take that risk. Before Elara could react, the future human activated a device, and a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Elara and Jackson were gone, transported to an unknown point in time. As they struggled to regain their bearings, Elara realized that they were no longer in the warehouse. They were standing in a desolate wasteland, the sky dark and filled with ash. In the distance, she could see the ruins of a city, its buildings crumbling and lifeless. Where are we? Jackson asked, his voice trembling. Elara's heart sank as she realized the truth. They were in the future the humans had been trying to prevent, a future where humanity had destroyed itself, leaving only ruins behind. But as she looked around, she noticed something else. The future humans were here too, their silver suits standing out against the bleak landscape. They were not just trying to change the past, they were trying to escape this future, to create a new timeline where they could survive. Elara knew what she had to do. She couldn't let them succeed. She had to find a way back to her own time, to stop them before it was too late. But as she and Jackson began their journey through the ruins, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The future humans were always one step ahead, and the fate of the timeline hung in the balance. The battle for the future was far from over, and Elara knew that the choices she made now would determine the destiny of humanity. She just hoped she was strong enough to make the right ones. Part 4. The Edge of Eternity. The air in the desolate future was thick with the scent of decay and ash. Elara and Jackson moved cautiously through the ruins, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The sky above was a sickly orange, streaked with dark clouds that blotted out the sun. It was a world devoid of life, a grim testament to the consequences of humanity's mistakes. As they navigated the crumbling streets, Elara's mind raced. She needed to find a way back to her own time. But the temporal device they had used to stabilize the rifts was damaged, its energy reserves nearly depleted. Without it, they were stranded in this bleak future, powerless to stop the future humans from rewriting history. Elara, Jackson said, his voice low and urgent. Look. He pointed to a nearby building, its facade partially collapsed. Inside, they could see a faint glow, a sign of technology still functioning in this dead world. Elara's heart leapt with hope. If they could find a power source or a working terminal, they might be able to repair the device and find a way home. They entered the building cautiously, their footsteps crunching on broken glass and debris. The glow led them to a hidden chamber deep within the structure, where they found a makeshift lab filled with advanced equipment. At its center was a temporal portal, similar to the one they had seen in the warehouse but smaller and more unstable. This is it, Elara whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. This is our way back. But as they approached the portal, a voice rang out, cold and commanding. Stop right there. Elara and Jackson turned to see a group of future humans emerging from the shadows, their silver suits gleaming in the dim light. At their head was the same figure Elara had confronted in the warehouse, their leader, a tall, imposing woman with piercing blue eyes. You're persistent, Drive, Voss, the woman said, her voice tinged with both admiration and disdain. But you're wasting your time. You can't stop what's already in motion. Elara stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. I won't let you destroy the timeline. There has to be another way to save your future without erasing ours. The woman's expression softened, but only for a moment. You don't understand. Our world is dying because of the choices your generation made. We've tried everything to fix it, but it's too late. The only way to ensure humanity's survival is to start over, to create a new timeline where we can correct those mistakes. Elara shook her head. You're not correcting mistakes, you're making new ones. Every time you change the past, you erase countless lives. You're no better than the people who destroyed your world. The woman's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble, the walls of the lab shook, and the temporal portal flickered wildly, its energy fluctuating. What's happening? Jackson asked, his voice filled with panic. The timeline is collapsing, Elara said, her voice grim. All the changes they've made, it's too much. The fabric of reality can't handle it. The future humans looked at each other, their confidence wavering. Even they hadn't anticipated this. The leader turned to Elara, her expression desperate. You have to help us, she said. If the timeline collapses, there won't be a future for any of us. Elara hesitated, torn between her anger and her sense of responsibility. She didn't trust the future humans, but she couldn't let the timeline be destroyed. She had to find a way to fix this, for everyone. Give me access to your technology, she said finally. Together, we might be able to stabilize the timeline before it's too late. The woman nodded, and the future humans stepped aside, allowing Elara and Jackson to approach the portal. Elara worked quickly, her hands flying over the controls as she integrated the damaged temporal device with the portal systems. Jackson assisted her, his engineering skills proving invaluable as they rerouted power and recalibrated the energy flow. The ground continued to shake, the air growing thick with static as the timeline unraveled around them. Elara could feel the weight of time itself pressing down on her, threatening to crush her under its immense power. Almost there, she muttered, her voice strained. Just a little more. With a final adjustment, the portal flared to life, its energy stabilizing. The tremors subsided, and the air grew still. Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her body trembling with exhaustion. It's done, she said, turning to the future humans. The timeline is stable, for now, but you have to stop. No more changes, no more rewriting history. The leader nodded, her expression solemn. You've given us a second chance. Drive, Voss. We won't forget that. Elara looked at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and caution. Promise me you'll find another way, a way to save your future without destroying ours. The woman hesitated, then extended her hand. I promise. Elara shook her hand, the gesture sealing an unspoken agreement between them. The future humans stepped back, activating their own devices as they prepared to return to their time. As they disappeared into the time stream, Elara felt a sense of relief wash over her. But there was no time to rest. She and Jackson still had to return to their own time. To ensure that the timeline remained intact, they stepped through the portal, the world around them blurring as they were swept through the currents of time. When they emerged, they were back in the warehouse, the portal behind them flickering and fading as it closed for good. Elara looked around, her heart pounding as she took in the familiar surroundings. Did it work? Jackson asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Elara checked the temporal anomaly detector, her breath catching as she saw the readings. The timeline was stable, the ripples caused by the future humans' actions slowly fading away. They had done it, they had saved the timeline. But as she looked at Jackson, she knew that their work was far from over. The future was still uncertain, and the choices they made now would shape the destiny of humanity. They had been given a second chance, and Elara was determined to make the most of it. Come on, she said, her voice filled with resolve. We have a lot of work to do. As they left the warehouse, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, Elara felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. The battle for the timeline was over, but the journey to secure humanity's future was just beginning, and she was ready to face it, one step at a time.